needs coming. So,
just give me a moment. I'll just check the recording. Okay, maybe my screen is frozen. Okay. Namaste, everyone. Warm welcome to our esteemed resource person for the day, Dr. Beloo Mehra ji. And greetings to all our enthusiastic, dynamic set of participants. I take this opportunity to welcome everyone on the second day of our 10-day certificate course on integrating Indian knowledge systems in academia through the New Education Policy 2020, a vision for civilizational reclamation. Yesterday, we had the very first session of our course where we were lucky enough to experience, not just learn, but experience meditation, the power of meditation and yoga in the guidance of Professor Umesh Arya sir, wherein he talked and also led us through a Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And I am delighted to welcome all our participants for the second session of this third edition of our IKS certificate course. Some of you who may have just joined today's session, if you have missed yesterday's session, please don't worry, because you will have access to the recordings on NLD's YouTube channel. And I'm delighted to share with Dr. Beloo ji that this is the third edition of NLD's attempt at doing an IKS certificate course. Our first edition was Indian Knowledge Systems, Navigating the Extent and Scope, which we accomplished in February 2025. And the second edition was done in June-July 2025, wherein we were exploring the pathways and trajectories of Indian knowledge systems. So as all of you know, this is the third edition, and we are confident that we will also be doing a fourth edition very, very soon. This 10-day IKS certificate course is being offered in collaboration with Shri Guru Tegh Bahadur Khalsa College, Shri Anandpur Sahib, Punjab. And at NLD, we are extremely grateful to the organizing team from the college, the convener of this certificate course, Dr. Jasveer Singh, principal of the college, coordinator, Dr. Gurpreet Kaur Madam, who is the in charge of the IKS cell at the college and also assistant professor and head, PG Department of English, and the co-coordinators of this course, Dr. Sharanjit Kaur, assistant professor in chemistry. Dr. Sharanjit Madam was with us yesterday, and Professor Sukhwinder Kaur, assistant professor in commerce. So many, many thanks to the team from the college as well. And with this, I am extremely pleased, honored, delighted to welcome Dr. Beloo Mehra ji to do today's session on a very interesting topic, contemporary significance of Sri Aurobindo's spiritual view of nation and nationalism. And before I formally introduce Dr. Beloo ji, I would like to share that I have known her in personal and professional capacity. In COVID times in 2020, I'd enrolled for a course that she was facilitating on Indian culture and self-development. And I think that was the best decision, because in COVID, we were exploring a lot of things as academics. It was a very good opportunity for me to learn under her mentorship and also become part of a group which was interested in Indian knowledge systems. So I can say that that was probably the starting point of my interest in Indian knowledge systems. And I'm glad that you were also subsequently, Beloo ji, able to visit my university, Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda in Gujarat, and participate as a keynote speaker in some conferences and organized by my university. So it is a delight to have Beloo with us, and now I will be formally introducing her. Dr. Beloo Mehra serves as the director of BhāratShakti, an institute of Sri Aurobindo Society, which is dedicated to research and program development in areas related to Indian culture. She holds a PhD in educational, organizational, and leadership from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, USA, and a master's degree in economics from the Delhi School of Economics, Delhi University. Dr. Beloo has been a former professor of education at Antioch University in Ohio, USA, before she moved to India in 2007 to devote herself to the field of Sri Aurobindo studies as a student, researcher, writer, educator, program designer, editor, and curator. She writes and speaks regularly on topics related to integral education, Indian culture, social cultural evolution, and integral yoga. She has developed and taught postgraduate courses in these areas, and she has curated several academic programs for university students in both India and the United States. Dr. Beloo is the editor of Renaissance, the online journal of Sri Aurobindo Society, and she has authored several books, some of which are as follows: Antar Yatra, Soul Journeys, Understanding Contemporary India in the Light of Sri Aurobindo, The Spiritual Foundations of Indian Culture, Indian Literary Tradition in the Light of Sri Aurobindo, and another interesting book that she has authored is The ABCs of Indian National Education. And when I was discussing with her before this program was being conceptualized, at the time that this certificate course was being conceptualized as to what topic she could think on, honestly, I could not think of anything else but Sri Aurobindo, because I truly believe that if there is anybody who is in the modern sense really an inspiration in terms of how to bring Bharatiya thought and Bharatiya ethos in different domains, in education, in governance, in political thought, in administration, then it is Sri Aurobindo. And as academics and researchers, we have so much to learn from his work. There is so much of inspiration to seek from his work. There is so much to put into action in our lives and in our work as educators from Sri Aurobindo's ideas to put into our educational space. So I once again take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Beloo, and I'm sincerely hoping that this will not be the last time that she is on NLD's platform. We would like to invite her again and again. And on behalf of my team at NLD, Dr. Pradyuman sir, Dr. Vikas, I'm sure Dr. Vikas, who's my colleague, is also in the meeting, and Dr. Pratibha, I welcome Dr. Beloo, and the floor is yours, and we are very excited to learn about Sri Aurobindo's thoughts and ideas through you. Welcome.
Namaste and good evening to everyone. I hope I'm clearly audible.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Nidhi, and your entire team at NLD and Sri Guru Tegh Bahadur College for really putting such a rich program together. And I hope to, yesterday I could not join. I had another session with the Sri Aurobindo Society Delhi branch around that same time. But I hope to be able to join at least a few sessions in the next few days as my schedule permits. But today I'm very happy to be with you all and just share a few thoughts in the limited time we had about Sri Aurobindo's thoughts on nation and nationalism, and hopefully through that presentation, some ideas will be sown in our minds as to how we can integrate that in our work that we do as educators, and how to use those thoughts to inspire young mind. Before I start, I have one question. If people can just maybe through their chat responses or just unmute themselves and say, there are a lot of people in this group. I'm seeing already 54. Is there anyone here who does not know anything about Sri Aurobindo in terms of his work as a freedom revolutionary, as a freedom fighter? So do I need to go into any basics in terms of what he was doing? Because I was going to present more about his thoughts on nation and nationalism, which were the basis, the foundation for his revolutionary work. So I can go over the details about his revolutionary work in 2 minutes if there are few people who don't know anything. Or otherwise, I can straight away jump into the topic.
Yes, everyone, please respond quickly. If you definitely need some basic idea about Sri Aurobindo, yes, Sri Devi ji, I think, yes, ma'am, there are a few raised hands.
Okay.
Bhakta ji, Sri Devi ji.
All right.
Yeah, I think we can have a quick primer.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so thank you. So Sri Aurobindo, if I have to just give the very basics of his outer life, who he was, born 1872, 15th August 1872, left his physical body on 5th December 1950. For the last 40 years of his life, he was based in Pondicherry. He arrived in Pondicherry in 1910. Before that, from age 7 onwards to 21, he studied in England, and he was sent there by his father along with 2 of his brothers with a very strict, strict instruction given to his guardians that he and his brothers should be kept as far away from any Indian influence as possible. But then this was I don't want to go into detail as to why his father did that, because that's not our topic today. But then towards, the later part of Sri Aurobindo's stay in England as a student, where, by the way, he excelled. So during the later part, he had become very conscious of the attempts that were going on. Also, the attempts that were going on in England for the freedom of India from the British colonial rule. And his father, by that time, had also had a change of heart, and he was sending newspaper cuttings to Aurobindo Ghosh. That's what his name was. To tell him what kind of oppression Indian public was facing under British colonial rule. So Sri Aurobindo, or Aurobindo Ghosh, at that time itself had started taking interest in struggle for Indian independence. He had even joined a secret society there called Lotus and Daggers and things like that. His father also had an ambition for him that he should join the ICS, which was what today we know as IAS, the Indian Administrative Service, the Indian Civil Services during the British time. And Sri Aurobindo had cleared everything. He was a brilliant student, but he did not appear for the final exam, which was the riding test, the horse riding test. 2-3 times he just failed to appear because in his heart, he did not feel that he should be working for the British colonial rule. So they disqualified him. And in the meantime, through his brother's contact, the Maharaja of Baroda, Maharaja Gaikwad, that's the Baroda connection. He happened to be in England, and he met him and he hired him right on the spot. And he kind of boasted about it, that I got an ICS for just 700 rupees or something, like whatever was the salary at that time. So that brought Sri Aurobindo to India. 13 years he spent in Baroda. It was a very important phase for him, where he sort of what today we know as decolonizing our mind. He was probably the pioneer in doing that decolonizing work. So he immersed himself into everything Indian. Now here this is a person who did not even know his mother tongue, because or not maybe just very in a rudimentary way. So he hired a Bengali teacher. He was learning Gujarati, he was learning Marathi, he self-taught Sanskrit, he immersed himself into what he would later call as to find the soul of India. So that's where his immersion into today, all the talk that we do of decolonizing and Indian knowledge systems, he sort of lived through that on his own. So, the great scholar of the best of the Western classics, the best of the Western literature, he knew not just English, he knew French, he knew Italian, he knew Greek, Latin, you name it. So he had done all the classics of the West, and now he was immersing himself in all the classics of the East, the India in particular. So, and around that time, so at that time, Baroda was, a princely state outside of the British rule, except that the Maharaja still had some, there was still a decorum. He could not officially go against the British. So there was still a protocol that had to be maintained for the sake of harmony. So the revolutionary work that Sri Aurobindo was doing at that time was a little bit behind the scene, actually quite a lot behind the scene. In fact, when he landed in India, within 6 months, at the age of 21, he was asked to write some articles for a journal called Indu Prakash. And he wrote a series of 9 articles called New Lamps for the Old. And by that time, there was they were such strongly worded articles, not necessarily against the British, but against the policy of the Indian National Congress at that time, which, according to Sri Aurobindo, was using the method of pleading and, requesting, praying to the British, ki thoda sa, give it this, give us this, give us that. And Sri Aurobindo was saying that's not how we would want freedom. We want freedom on our terms, and with the understanding that this is our due right, which Tilak later on, the idea that, Swaraj is our birthright, Tilak sort of picked up on it later, Lokmanya Tilak. But Sri Aurobindo was the first one to start demanding Poon Swaraj. Anyway, as long as he was in the service of Maharaja of Baroda, which included some, like personal service to the Maharaja, in the sense like, doing some surveys for him, doing some writing, speeches and things like that. But also within a few years, he was also teaching at what was Baroda College at that time, which later today is known as the Faculty of Arts at MSU. So, but at the same time, behind the scenes, he was connecting with the revolutionaries. And he became sort of the main link between the revolutionaries working on the east and western sides of India. And he was bringing them together. He was administering secret oaths, all kinds of interesting things. It was during that time he met Lokmanya Tilak, who at that time was not known by the title Lokmanya. Bal Gangadhar Tilak. He met Sister Nivedita, he met Bagha Jatin, so many other revolutionaries at that time. The seeds of Anushilan Samiti were also sown at that time. So many things that he was doing. But then happens 1905, which is the Bengal partition, the Bang Bhang. And that sort of started to convince Sri Aurobindo that he had to come out in the open. He had already started writing for different venues, different forums. But then in 1905, Bankim Chandra, C.R. Das started a journal called Bande Mataram. And that's what became the main instrument to really take the, it became the platform through which the voice of what they called themselves as nationalists, not revolutionaries. British called them extremists or terrorists, but they called the others, the typical Congress voice of that time, the moderates, and they were the extremists. But Sri Aurobindo and his group, they called themselves as nationalists. So Bande Mataram became the main platform on which the voice of the nationalists was going out. And it was such fiery languages, the language in which he was communicating. even in fact, there is documentation of how so many people in England were also reading, because he was really able to convey with a lot of wit, a lot of satire, a lot of humor, some very serious things. Reading his speeches is sort of like sadhana of its own kind. Anyway, so that happened, and then the British got worried. They charged him. They said, we have some evidence that you are promoting some sort of sedition. They took him to jail for 1 day, and they could not trace anything back to him, because he had a habit of not signing many of his editorials. So they could not pinpoint that these things were written by Sri Aurobindo. So they let him go. But then he knew that this is just for a very brief time. They are going to come after him. Finally, they did in 1908. They arrested him when one incident happened, Muzaffarpur bombing happened. And in connection with that, they arrested him. They thought he was the mastermind of that bomb incident, Muzaffarpur bombing. He was taken to jail in Alipur in Kolkata, and he was put in jail for 1 year. And the trial that lasted, again, Chittaranjan Das became his defense lawyer. The trial was probably the largest trial at that time. They had more than 1,200 pieces of evidence the prosecution had, but they couldn't stick anything. So he was discharged. He was, acquitted exactly a year after his prison term. And the cell where he spent a lot of time as solitary prisoner, it's still being preserved in Kolkata at the Presidency. It's called Presidency Correctional Home now. And you can take permission and go and visit there. It's sort of like a very sacred spot. So a lot of things happened in the prison, and that's what I will also talk towards the end of my presentation a little bit. But I hope for now this is enough as an orientation, so we can move on to the main topic. Nidhi ji?
Yes, ma'am. I think this is perfect as the orientation.
Okay.
And this also gives a lot of food for thought to all our participants to start exploring Sri Aurobindo's life, his works, his writings, and what all he contributed to the larger landscape of Bharat.
Yes, great. Thank you. All right. So now I'm going to just jump into our topic.
Yes, participants, I just want to let you know that the chat box is open. So in case you have any questions, any insights, please use the chat box.
Okay, yes. Nidhi ji, since I can't see you all, so I just want you to stop me and just speak if there is any question that needs to be addressed immediately. If something is not clear, or if my voice breaks, because we are in the monsoon season here right now. So with rains, sometimes internet can get a little sketchy. It's raining right now here.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so this is what we will explore briefly today. Contemporary significance of Sri Aurobindo's spiritual view of nation and nationalism. So my part mostly will be about giving some pointers as to Sri Aurobindo's spiritual view of nation and nationalism. The significance part I leave for some reflection, but also maybe it can come at the end in the form of a couple of question and answers. Or maybe it will come as we start exploring. So I thought I will just start with this part. As I was just describing in the brief, sort of introduction to Sri Aurobindo as a revolutionary. During this Alipur trial, during this year, the year in which he was imprisoned, and the charges were serious. The charges were of sedition. And in fact, Sri Aurobindo Society has made a documentary about his 1 year in prison, and it's called The Transformation. It's available in English, Hindi, and several other Indian languages on Sri Aurobindo Society's YouTube free. You can just go and watch it for free. It's about 55 minutes, which really gives us a summary of the transformation that he went through during that 1 year in prison. But I want to point out this one thing. During the closing statement, his lawyer, Deshbandhu Chittaranjan Das, who was a good friend of Sri Aurobindo, he said that this is not an ordinary trial, or this is not an ordinary person standing before the British court, but he's standing before the court of time, and history will remember him. History will remember this trial, and history will remember him for what he is, who he is. And he used three qualifiers, three phrases to describe Sri Aurobindo. Poet of patriotism. I've already said he was a great, wonderful writer, a fiery writer. And after 1905, he had also been, he was also giving very fiery speeches. So he was called by C.R. Das as poet of patriotism, prophet of nationalism, and lover of humanity. So this is sort of the way, we begin to understand who he was. His nationalism was not just confined to nation or a certain, certain group of humans, but he was a lover of humanity while talking about the spirit of nationalism. And that's the thing that I want to kind of bring out through some of the quotes or some of the points that I've selected. Later on, one of Sri Aurobindo's close disciples, Nalinikant Gupta, who was also a fellow revolutionary, he was in the prison with him. He was also acquitted, and he added another epithet for Sri Aurobindo, the bringer of divine life, the bringer of the supramental consciousness. You can define it, understand it in different way, but that's the yogic work that he did after he had moved to Pondicherry. But right now our concern is for these three parts: the poet of patriotism, prophet of nationalism, and lover of humanity. So when we talk about nationalism and how Sri Aurobindo explained what nationalism is, at one place he defines it very briefly, very succinctly, as an expression of the nation's authentic temperament. Let's think about it just for a minute. Expression of the nation's authentic temperament. This compels us to ask two questions. What is a nation? And what do we understand by a nation's authentic temperament or its innate genius? Something that is unique to the group of people who form that nation. So these are the two questions that we will explore, and we will see that in his vision of both these questions, what is a nation and what is a nation's innate authentic temperament or innate inner genius, innermost genius rather, we will see how he helps us decolonize our own patterns of thinking about these two questions. Now, for Sri Aurobindo, one of the things that is very clear was that India, or Mother India, as he would call it, was not just a piece of land. It was not just certain mountains, rivers, certain languages, certain religions or practices or customs, but Mother India for her was a living goddess, a living power. And in fact, there are two accounts that I would like to share at this point. One is when he was in Baroda as an educator, and he had several illustrious students. One of the most illustrious students, whom I'm sure many of you already know of, the founder of Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, right? He
Kanhaiya Munshi.
Yes, K.M. Munshi ji. He has said this in his book about the time that he spent with Aurobindo Ghosh at that time. Aurobindo Ghosh, the English and French professor at Baroda. And he's talked about how in one discussion, some students were wanting to, they were saying that we want to do something for the freedom of country. And Sri Aurobindo picked up a map of India and he laid it down on the table and he said, do you see mother in this map? If you don't, then you are not ready to sacrifice everything for the sake of her freedom. Another point I want to bring out is a famous letter of Sri Aurobindo, which came out during his trial. It was a personal letter that he had written in 1905 to his wife. I forgot to mention he did marry in 1901 to a woman named Mrinalini Devi. And in one of the letters, he talked about his 3 madnesses. It was written in Bengali, so madness is the English word that we would use. And he talked about one of the madnesses that he mentioned was that while others may see India as their country, I see her as my mother. And how can I, live a life of luxury or, have some, because he didn't live for very long periods of time with his wife because of his various works that he was taking on, that how can I live comfortably and a happy grahasth life when a demon is sitting on my mother's chest? Then later on, there is another letter of Sri Aurobindo written to a disciple from Pondicherry when somebody asked him, do you think India is Bharat Mata, mother, or India is just, like any other nation that we would speak of? Sri Aurobindo wrote a very funny, but a very somewhat, very strong reply. He said, do you take me for a materialist? If I had seen India only as a land, I wouldn't have spent so much of my life doing that I did for India's freedom, or the work that I'm doing even now as a yogi. So for him, it was very clear that India is not just a piece of earth, she's a living goddess, a living power. Now this tells us that already we have some sort of a spiritual view of looking at nation. But then Sri Aurobindo would go a little deeper. He said, in fact, if you read his entire essay on this part, he says, we have been trained by the schools or school of thought of the West, where we are taught to see things only from an outside. But an Indian mind, an Indian view will always be to start to look at things from inside out. So he talked about how to view a nation. It would be exactly like the Indian view of who or what is an individual. We are not just what we see. There are layers of being in us. To put it very simply, there are, as the Upanishadic languages, there are different shariras in us, different bodies in us, from gross to subtle to causal to something beyond. And it is from inside out that we have to look at nation, look at culture, look at society. So what would be the outermost body of a nation? The sthul sharira. That would be the geography of the land. That would be the mountains, the hills, the rivers, the plateau, and things like that. That would be the Annamaya Kosha. But within this Annamaya Kosha, connected to that, this geography is meaningless if there are not people living in it. The pran is not there, the life body of the nation. Together, these two create what is the gross body of the nation, which is the geography, the gross physical body, the Annamaya. Annamaya, Annam word in Vedic Vedantic understanding is matter. So the material, what you see, the geography of the land, and the life force, the prana of the Pranamaya Kosha. Together, these two form the Sthula Sharira of the nation. Then, in that is a subtle nation, a subtle body, a Sukshma Sharira of the nation. Just like we all are not just our bodies or the ability to breathe in and breathe out, just the life force, we have thoughts, we have feelings, we have ways to understand life. We have patterns of thinking. We create art. We create philosophies. We create visions. We create religion. All kinds of things that we do. That's part of the Manomaya Kosha, the mind body of the nation. That still does not complete the picture. Behind that is the causal body or the Karan Sharir of the nation. This is where the authentic temperament comes into play. So the causal body or the Karan Sharir of the nation is that unique, peculiar temperament that a nation develops over a period of time through its lived experience. And that is what makes it distinct, unique from others. So that Karan Sharir, it's Karan, the word itself says it causes the nation to organize its outer life, organize its Manomaya life, mind's life, and the outer life. In fact, Sri Aurobindo speaks of the culture also to understand it this way, that Indian culture has to be, or any culture has to be seen at these three levels. The soul of a culture, which would be more of the Karan Sharir, which expresses itself in the mind, in the art, the sciences, the literature, the philosophies, the higher religious thought we come out with, and how we organize the outer material life, where we have the social system, the economic systems, all that is part of the culture. So these are the three ways he says we should look at the nation also. The Sthula Sharira, which is the geography and the people, and the Manomaya Kosha or the Sukshma Sharira, and which is the mind of the nation, and the Karan Sharira, the causal body of the nation, that authentic temperament that we have to discover, which is where the soul of the nation resides. But the Indian thought does not end there. Indian thought goes even deeper, that behind these three bodies of the mother, the nation, he wrote, and within them all. Now this is interesting. It is there within all these three bodies, and behind these three bodies is the true source of her life, the nation's life. Now this source is immortal and unchanging. That is the Atman, the self, the Paramatman, the Brahman. So many words our rishis have given us to talk of that one supreme source. And nation is merely one manifestation of that source. That source is the universal Narayan, the universal supreme being, universal supreme consciousness, whatever we want to call it, the one who expresses itself in many, of whom we are all the children. Now, this is this relation between one and many is the crux of Indian thought, because there is one supreme source, but it expresses itself out in many different ways. We have the famous line from the Veda also, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Just because there are many, it does not negate the truth of one. Just because there is one, it does not negate the truth of many. So here is a contemporary significance. When you understand the nation, our nation, for example, in this case, as one manifestation of the many possible manifestations that can come from one supreme source, there is no room for chauvinism here, because the other manifestations are just as equally true. There has to be a truth in the manifestation, because there can be nations which can, well, today politically we would consider them as nations, but they are not based on the truth of their soul. They are nations built on falsehood. And in a matter of time, over the course of time, they will disappear, or they will reintegrate themselves to their true source. But that's another discussion which we are not going, at least not now in the thing. But this is very interesting to know, that just as one nation's existence, one nation as a manifestation of that one common supreme source is true, the others are also true. But at the same time, it also insists that the truth of their being has to be there. That unique temperament, that causal body has to be there, which is where the truth of the nation resides, or through which it expresses itself. So in this grand vision, how Sri Aurobindo says, he sort of summarizes this. By the way, wherever I'm writing, the references, these are complete works of Sri Aurobindo. The CWSA stands for that. There is volume number and the page number. So volume 7 is his writings from Bande Mataram, the journal for which he was writing and for which he was later arrested because of his writings in Bande Mataram. And of course, the other work that he was doing behind. So he summarizes that when we speak of a nation, we also mean a separate culture and a civilization, a peculiar national temperament which has become too deeply rooted to be altered. And in all these, we discover a manifestation of God in national life, which is living, sacred, and adorable. It is this which we speak of as the mother. That manifestation of God in national life is what Mother India is, what Bharat Mata is. And that manifestation of God in other nations' life will be there in their own way. They have to discover it in their own way. One of his visions was the vision of human unity, which his spiritual collaborator, who moved from France to India to work with Sri Aurobindo in 1920. She first came to meet with him in 1914, and then the First World War started. So she had to leave for a few years to France, back to France, and then to Japan. From Japan, she moved back to Pondicherry, and after that, she never left. Her name is Mehra Alfasa. In the Ashram Sri Aurobindo Society, we call it as simply the mother. To all devotees of Sri Aurobindo or followers of Sri Aurobindo, she's simply known as the mother. So she put that vision of Sri Aurobindo of human unity in matter when she inaugurated what is today known as Auroville, the unique experiment in human unity on the basis of psychological unity, not any outer instrument of unity. So this is the, this connects with that vision that each nation, and they have this place, like one part of Auroville is called as the international zone, where each people coming from different nations are supposed to work within themselves and work through outer activities to discover the nation's soul of their nation, of their countries. So that is the manifestation of God in national life. So the idea is through the soul we can become one, we can unite. Now, if this is the view of nation that Sri Aurobindo has given us, what is his view of nationalism? Nationalism, according to Sri Aurobindo, the quote that I'm picking up today, is it's a divinely appointed Shakti or force of the divine. And just like any other force of the divine, it is sent out, it manifests to do a certain work of the divine. And once the work is done, it goes back to its original source. It merges with its original source. So nationalism, he says, is a divinely appointed Shakti of the eternal and must do its God-given work before it returns to the bosom of the universal energy from which it came. Now, this is very interesting. People, bringing a little bit of contemporary part, people who say that the time of nationalism is over and we are living in this la-la land of internationalism, globalism, need to really ask themselves, has the work of nationalism been done? Or are we still, requiring this work of this force of nationalism? I'm going to read out 2 or 3 points and then leave it for us to kind of reflect on and contemplate on whether the work of nationalism as a force is done or is there more that is needed. Now, Sri Aurobindo had this very interesting way of writing. He would first tell you what something is not, before he would tell you what something is. That's how he wrote his the major magnum opus philosophical work, The Life Divine. Now, in Bande Mataram, he did not probably could follow it because these were short editorials, short articles, or the text of his speeches that he was giving. So, but I have followed his, practice of describing, using Sri Aurobindo's words, what nationalism is not, before we go into what nationalism is. Now, all these writings came in the context of all the criticisms that he and his revolutionary group were facing at the hand of the moderate leaders of the time, and at the time of and the hands of the British, who were really suppressing these nationalist voices. So Sri Aurobindo categorically, very first thing he says, nationalism is not extremism. It's not extremism in two sense. It does not in any way promote unreasonable violence of spirit, not just the physical violence, but any unreasonable violence of spirit. Just because there is a desperation, you become violent in your words, you become violent in your thought, or you become violent in action. That's not what nationalism is. Though we also know Sri Aurobindo said very clearly about himself that I'm not a pacifist. If violence is needed to attain freedom, that is what is needed. What matters is what is the intention with which is being done. But just, you want to oppose something, protest something, and you use unreasonable violence, that's not what, that's an extremist way of looking at it. That's not the nationalists' way of looking at it. Nationalism is not about advocating lawlessness for its own sake. A lot of contemporary relevance of this idea itself. In fact, he said a nationalist would have a profound reverence for the essence of law, because it's law that is needed to have a sound and healthy national life. So when they were protesting certain British policies, it's not because they had hatred against some sort of a hatred against the law, but rather, he said, what is needed is that the law has to be an outgrowth of the nation's organic existence. And the British law was not coming out of the organic temperament of the nation, Indian nation. Rather, it was an imposition, and it was serving certain colonial ends. This is one of the key things about understanding Sri Aurobindo's revolutionary work. Anytime any of the other leaders, even later on when he moved to Pondicherry, there were many, he used to hold talks with a lot of, they are called as evening talks, or, even like correspondence with several of his disciples, many of whom were, with him during revolutionary days, but many of whom were also drawn to other freedom fighters. In fact, there were several Gandhians who came to meet Sri Aurobindo and asked him about, what is needed for India's freedom and things like that. And one of the things Sri Aurobindo always insisted was that no matter what any other leader at that time was saying, that first we need to resolve our caste problem. First, we need to resolve our Harijan problem. First, we need to resolve our Hindu-Muslim problem. Sri Aurobindo said all these problems come later. First comes the need for our political freedom, so we can draw our own destiny. We can create our own destiny. Everything will happen based on what we as a nation find what is suitable and what resonates with our own temperament, rather than moralistic preaching or Tolstoyan ideas or any other external influence. We have to discover our own innate temperament. So the law has to be an outgrowth of the nation's organic existence, and law has to be understood as something made for people. People are not made for law. So he said, even though we have a profound respect and reverence for the essence of law, the spirit of law, not always the word, but we do not accept law as a fetish, that just because this is what the law says, security, peace, this cannot be an aim in themselves. because otherwise revolutionaries would not have been able to work. So this is how he explained what nationalism is not. But what is a nationalist, or who is a nationalist? That's what I want to go next. So who is a nationalist according to Sri Aurobindo? Again, I have pulled out just this one quote. You see, his writings are so humongous to find just the right words to sort of really bring out the essence of his vision. It was really a very interesting process or a meditation for me as well. So I'm thankful to NLD to give me that opportunity to really, cult some of these words. So Sri Aurobindo, in one of his editorial, wrote, "Let no man dare to call himself a nationalist if he does so merely with a sort of intellectual pride. If you are going to be a nationalist, you must do it in the religious spirit." Now, Sri Aurobindo was writing at a time where we don't, we have to understand when he's using the word religious, he's not using it in the sense of an organized religion. He's using it in the sense of dharma. So he's writing to an audience who are still very ingrained with the kind of colonial understanding or the Eurocentric understanding of certain words. For him, in his mind, it is clear because he has used different words at different times. He even coined a word to distinguish between religion and dharma. He even coined a word called religionism. So religionism is what we would understand as organized religion, and religion, he would even sort of use it in exchange for, as a substitute for dharma. So you must do the work in the dharmic spirit. You must remember, and what is this religious spirit or the dharmic spirit? That you are an instrument of God for the salvation of your own country. You must live as the instruments of God. So this is such a deep spiritual view of what it means to work as a nationalist, to work for our own country, to be the instruments of God. See it not because you are doing it as some sort of a chauvinistic, pride in your nation, but that you are an instrument of God who's been assigned this work to work towards. At that time, it was the freedom of the country. Today, it can be anything else. In any work, actually, any work can be done as instrument of God with this attitude of instruments of God and God reflected in our own country. God that is manifesting as national life in our own country. Now, what is this nationalism? For him, nationalism was 2-3 things. This is nationalism is, I said, Shakti of the eternal. It's a divine Shakti, divine force. It expresses itself as an aspiration, as a deep yearning. What is this yearning for? For the realization of the divine unity. Now, why this is so important? Because it comes straight from our Vedantic vision, Vedic vision of existence, of oneness. It's the realization of that oneness which expresses itself as unity in the nation. So nationalism for him is a yearning, is an aspiration for that divine oneness, that divine unity in the nation. This unity must come on the foundation of an essential equality. Just as the Veda says, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, when there are many, the Indra, the Maruts, the Varuna, the Mitra, all the Vedic gods, Matrishwan, all those who are listed in that hymn of Rig Veda, they are separate, but they are essentially equal. They are different powers of that one. And that's why they are known by different names. So this unity has to be realized on the foundation of essential equality between individual and an individual, between jati and jati, between class and class. I mean, I kept the word caste and caste because that's the word, English word that he was using at that time. But we know that he has done a very thorough criticism of the Western view of understanding caste and bringing out the Indian wisdom of what Varna is, what it is supposed to be, and he's taken it beyond, like in a futuristic way, what is the future of that Varna system as well, but that's not where we are going today. So all are different, but equal and united parts of that Virat Purusha, that cosmic being which expresses at the gross physical level as realized in the nation. So in the Rig Veda, we have the image of that cosmic Purusha who is sacrificed so that this one cosmic being becomes many. And at the level of the gross level, he's known, the spirit that is there behind the gross body is called as Virat Purusha. We know this from our Bhagavad Gita also, the Virat Roop, when Krishna shows his Virat Roop to Arjuna. That's at the level of manifestation. So at the level of manifestation, they are all united in that golden Virat Purusha. But they are all different but equal parts of that one Virat Purusha, the Virat being. Virat means one who is spread everywhere, as it's reflected in the nation. So this is how he's looking at the nation also from that Vedic Vedantic vision. And finally, he says any social political system that either we come up with or that is imposed on us from any outside, source, if they deny this essential equality, a nationalist has no tolerance for it. You see, this has such great implication for us to assess any policies or any ways of patterns of thinking that are imposed on us. We may have become politically free, but we still carry in our governance structures, in our political structures, in our legal structures, in our educational policies, a lot of the colonial patterns of thinking. So anything that denies this essential equality at the level of the soul, at the level of the temperament, the unique soul element, that should not be tolerated. Any policy that creates inequality at any level between people, one group of people and another, that should not be tolerated. The attempt should be to go back to the essential equality and also the outer difference, and to harmonize the two. So there are lots of great significance one can, a political thinker, a sociological thinker can find from these views of nationalism. So it was this spirit of nationalism which Sri Aurobindo was sort of constantly working with in coming up with his policies, his strategies for various Congress sessions that he attended, for various ideas that he was throwing out through his Bande Mataram writings, through his speeches, the revolutionary work. He had a 5-point program, all the things that we know today as, which became popular after 1915 or so, the boycott, Swaraj, all of these policies were first drafted and explained, and their spirit was explained by Sri Aurobindo in his writings in Bande Mataram. National education was one of the 5 points of his full comprehensive program for Indian national freedom, national arbitration courts as well. Somewhere later on, the idea of national education got dropped after Sri Aurobindo and several others sort of went away from the active political scene. But in Bengal, we still have something called, in Kolkata, called National Council of Education, which was the direct outcome of his work on national education that he and several others were doing at that time. So on the basis of this spirit of nationalism, he says, our aim, the aim of the nationalists at that time, is to build up India, not for her sake only, but for the sake of humanity. And this is very important because for him, India's rise is always meant for the rise of humanity. Why it is so, I'll just come to that briefly. But I just want to, I chose this picture just to kind of emphasize this point. This is the portrait of Sri Aurobindo that is there in the Rashtrapati Bhavan. It was done by an artist at the ashram, Pramod Kumar Bhattacharya, and mother had specifically asked him to paint a portrait, and the Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch was instrumental in getting it done. This was at the time when Nehru was the Prime Minister and Rajendra Prasad was the president. All right, so just another picture from his revolutionary days, but this is after his prison sojourn, after his prison experience. This is in 1909. He was released on May 5th, May 6th, I believe. I'm forgetting the date, either May 5th or May 6th, 1909. And after that, he really was kind of invited to speak at various places. But the quote that I have there is from an earlier writing. Why I said he was so insistent on complete Swaraj, Purna Swaraj, he used that word. Why India must have Swaraj in order to live for the world, not as a slave for the material and political benefit of a single purse-proud, that is economically proud and selfish nation, but a free people for the spiritual and intellectual benefit of the human race. This is very important because when Sri Aurobindo immersed himself to kind of find what the soul of India was during his Baroda period, he was convinced that spirituality is the soul of India. The Indian authentic temperament is always to see things beyond or behind what we see on the outside. We are always seeking a higher or a deeper truth behind the material truth that we see, behind the material reality that we see. So this only India can give to the world. Now, he said at one place that it does not mean that other cultures or other nations have not had their phases of times of their spiritual inquiry. But India is the only one which has preserved that memory. Not just preserved the memory, but it's a living truth. That is why we have the Veda as preserved. Even though lots of branches, lots of shakhas of the Veda are lost, yet what has been preserved is exactly what people were chanting, say, 8,000 or 10,000 years ago, depending on how we understand our history and what archaeological evidence we want to believe in. But at least 5,000 to 8,000 years ago for sure. So why that has been able to preserve? There is some truth to that oral tradition, the oral chanting tradition, which preserved that, but also because that has been the soul of this nation. That is why from time to time we have seen so many avatars come on this land. He spoke of, he's actually written about it, of India as the last spiritual battlefield, where the last spiritual battle between truth and falsehood will be fought. And that's why India has to rise to first to its own spiritual truth, to first to its own spiritual, first to its own soul. It has to recognize, she has to recognize first her own soul so that she can become a leader for rest of the humanity. He said this is the task, at least in this Chatur Yuga, that has been assigned to India. See, he was a spiritual visionary. He was a mystic. He was a yogi. For him, time is not what we understand as, so 2000 to 2025. He was living in eternity. So he said in this Chatur Yuga, at least, the task of raising humanity to a spiritual way of existence is on shoulders of India. That is why India must have Swaraj. Swaraj is a term straight from the Veda. It means self-rule. Self, what is this self? The self that is a portion of the divine. That is a projection of the divine. That is the Atman. So first we have to find this Swaraj. We have to conquer ourselves, conquer our lower nature, allow the spirit in us to rule. And only the one who has found that Swaraj can become Samrat. Both these terms are straight from the Veda, Swaraj and Samrat. Only then he can become, or she can become, the ruler of others, Samrat. So, but while all his work was going on as a nationalist, as a revolutionary, nation, Sri Aurobindo said, is not the highest synthesis to which truth can go. The higher synthesis, something higher than nation, is humanity. And I've already given you 2-3 examples from his own writings, his own speeches as to, India must rise for the sake of the humanity. So humanity is a higher synthesis than nation, but higher than humanity is, why leave out all the other living beings? Why leave out other creatures? So a still higher synthesis would be all the living beings of the earth, right? The aspiring world of creatures. But beyond that is the Vedantic synthesis, the synthesis of God, the synthesis of one, where many become part of the one and yet keep their distinction. This does not only mean only the animate, living beings, living creatures, but why not matter? Why not other worlds that we don't see, the other, other realities? There is a world of ideas, there is a world of feelings, the vital world. We have something called, Gandharva-lok, right? Where all the music is supposed to come from. There are people in Manipur who consider themselves as descendants of the Gandharvas, descending straight from that world where these celestial singers were creating music. So all those worlds get synthesized in the highest synthesis, that is the synthesis of God. So we get a sense that nation is one of the many larger unities that we must aspire to. But nation is the first important unity to which we must have to aspire and in which we must live if we want to go to the next higher. So I just have this one quote from Sri Aurobindo to sort of highlight that point, that we must live as a nation before we can live in humanity. So nation, Sri Aurobindo said, is the highest psychological unity to which man has arrived successfully. Many of you may know the story of Vishnu as the Vaman avatar, when he takes 3 steps, right? The first 3 steps that he takes, Sri Aurobindo sort of gave a very symbolic interpretation of those 3 steps of Vishnu, where he said the first step is the first level of unity to which human being comes at, which is the unity of the family. So first we are an individual being, we go together with family, that's a larger unity. So it's sort of like working on our own egos when we work for the family, when we live together as a family. That, Sri Aurobindo said, nature has perfected. Second is the unity of the nation. Nature has more or less perfected that, but yet a lot of work remains. The third step of the Vishnu is going beyond nation to the unity of humanity, the human unity. But first, the nation's unity has to be perfected before we can talk about living together as human beings, no, the John Lennon song of, no boundaries, no nations, nothing like that. It's very nice as a dream, but it has to be practically first realized in the nation. All right. So another term that was that Sri Aurobindo and his fellow revolutionaries gave themselves were, they called themselves as new nationalists, because by this time there were also, the moderates were also saying, we are also working in the national interest. Why do you say that we are not working in the national interest? So there are several writings in which Sri Aurobindo speaks of what our new nationalism stands for. But for now, I have chosen one unfinished essay, The Bourgeois and the Samurai. And I personally think this should be a compulsory reading for all students in our colleges and universities. And the object of the new nationalism is defined in that writing, where he says, what is the aim of the new nationalism is to create a new nation in India by reviving in spirit and action ancient Indian character, the strong, great, and lofty spirit of old Aryavrata, and setting it to use and mold the methods and materials of modernity for the freedom, greatness, and well-being of a historic and immortal people. Indian nation is an old nation, but we have to bring a new nation by reviving the spirit of the ancient immortal character. That is the character of the Arya that he spoke about. In fact, one of the journals that he started after moving to Pondicherry, 1914 to 1921, which became the platform on which all his major works came out first as chapter by chapter. He was serializing those, whether it was the Life Divine, the Synthesis of Yoga, his essays on Indian culture, Indian art, national education. National education were written earlier. The Ideal of Human Unity, his Psychology of Social Development, which is now sold in the book form as The Human Cycle, and several other, these were the key works. His writings on the Veda, how can I forget that? Secret of the Veda, his commentaries on Isha Upanishad and several other Kain Upanishads and several other, writings, that they were all first serialized in Arya. He called that journal Arya with this very intention that that word has to be understood. So the spirit or the work of new nationalists were to transform the bourgeois, the typical middle class mentality, into the warrior, into the samurai that was needed. So samurai, the equivalent in Indian language would be the kshatriya. And Arya, Sri Aurobindo said, is a perfect synthesis of the Kshatra Tej and the Brahma Tej. So the Brahmin is the one who pursues the higher knowledge, knowledge of things beyond what we see in the material reality. That is the spiritual knowledge, the knowledge of my true self. One who pursues the knowledge of the higher self is Brahman. And one who pursues the, who is in pursuit of deeper courage and power is the Kshatriya. Arya synthesizes these two temperaments. So I'll just quickly go over how briefly what he defines as the Aryan temperament. Aryan, as he writes in one of his Vedic writings also, that the term that came up in the Veda was, it depicted a certain kind of high aspiration for a particular type of self-culture, training oneself, practicing an inner and outer practice. Yesterday, Nidhi was saying, you had a little taste of, yoga or meditation. All that comes part of the inner practice to develop certain powers within, of certain ideal life, of a certain high aspiration. All that acculturation is the work of the Arya. So Arya word means sort of one who is battling within against all lower nature, everything that stands opposed to the higher advance. It's an effort, it's an uprising, it's an overcoming. He has actually done a very deep etymological analysis of the word Arya itself, where each of the meanings he describes and how that word, see, he started writing that journal in 1914, just around that time, as if he was sort of prophetic in his understanding of why there was need to bring the true meaning of this word, because this word was taken up and abused so much at the hand of fascists and Nazis later on. So he had to sort of really bring out that, bring out the truth of that word. And that's he said, Sanatan Dharma is the Dharma of the Aryas. It's not a racial term in any way. It depicts a certain ideal, a certain practice of self-culture, growing in a certain self-culture. then the first law of the Aryan temperament is Swaraj, self-conquest, conquering our lower nature, everything that brings me down, whether it is jealousy, pettiness, anger, rage, mental preferences, mental biases, tamas, and we have to reject all of that, conquer all of that, and seek truth, right, height, and freedom, a higher truth in all that we do. That is the meaning of Arya, and the work of Indian nationalists truly is to cultivate this Aryan temperament. Now, I mentioned I know we are coming close to the end, so I'll just finish with a few more thoughts, because this is a very important document. I said the bourgeois and the samurai should be read by everyone. There are 2-3 writings of Sri Aurobindo that must be read by every college student and university student. This is one of them. This is the speech he gave after coming out of the prison in 1909. It was less than a month. So if he was released on May 5th, May 30th, this is a little place in Bengal, and they have still preserved the chair on which he sat when he reached there to deliver the speech. The speech was at the park of, the outer compound of Jai Krishna Public Library. This is the building of that, library, an old photo of that library. In the prison, Sri Aurobindo had a deep transformative experience. Now, when I was giving the summary of his life, I did not say anything about his yogic life. I only focused on his educational and revolutionary life. In 1904, Sri Aurobindo had some very profound spiritual realization, which today we would speak of as the Nirvana experience. So in 1904, itself, he had that experience. But in the prison, he had another major transformative realization, which is the realization we know as dynamic Brahman. So Nirvana is the static Brahman, the static divine. And this realization is the dynamic divine. What that means is where he saw Vasudeva, Shri Krishna, in every object, in every individual around him. When he was taken to the court for his trial, he saw in the prosecutor, he saw Shri Krishna. In prosecutor's pen, he saw Shri Krishna. In the judge's face, he saw Shri Krishna. In the bars of his cell, he saw Shri Krishna. For several days, he was in constant communion with Shri Krishna. And all that is part of that documentary that I mentioned. It's really a marvelous, it's a marvelous film. But on May 30th, 1909, Sri Aurobindo was invited to give a speech on what is Sanatan Dharma. It was organized by a group called Promotion of Religion or something like that. And Sri Aurobindo had nothing in his mind as to what he was going to speak, but he stood there and he meditated, and everything that he had experienced in the prison with Shri Krishna came out as the speech. And he talked about the 2 Adesh, the 2 commands that he received from Shri Krishna in the prison. And Shri Krishna, you have to understand that Sri Aurobindo had, even after his experience of the Nirvana, he still had some sort of an agnostic streak in him. He wrote that in his letter to his wife also, that if there is a God. So he was kind of like always questioning. In that letter he had written to his wife, he said, if there is a God, I want to see him. You see, so there was an agnostic and there was this, seeker in him, that I want to see if there is a God. So this doubt, whatever little doubt that he had, all that was washed off during his prison experience with Shri Krishna. So the truth of Sanatan Dharma was revealed to him in the prison, which became his Uttar Para speech. And I have a whole talk about the significance of that speech, but I'm just going to read out few things. This is earlier this year, I had a chance to go to the Uttar Para library, the Jai Kishan library. That's where this plaque is from. one of the commands he had from Sri Krishna was, this was totally Sri Krishna dictating to him, that I am doing the work that is needed to raise this nation. I am the one work. You thought you were doing freedom work, work for the freedom of the nation. I am the one who is doing the work. So Sri Aurobindo actually later also has said that he learned the true karma yoga in prison with Sri Krishna as his teacher. So one of the voices that he was hearing was that Sri Krishna is raising this nation to send forth his word. What is that word? The word is the Sanatan Dharma, the eternal path, the eternal Dharma. Dharma is, there is no other word in English language which can describe what Dharma is. Dharma is that which sustains. It's the truth in action, which sustains the entire existence. So it is for Sanatan Dharma that I am helping India rise. Sri Aurobindo speaks in that speech, but it is through him, the voice of Sri Krishna. It is for the world and not for themselves that they arise. When it is said that India shall rise, it is the Sanatan Dharma that shall rise. When it is said that India shall be great, it is the Sanatan Dharma that shall be great. This, by the way, is a portrait of Sri Aurobindo done by his younger brother, who was again a grand revolutionary in his time. He was also imprisoned at the same time. He was sent to Andaman Nicobar, the cellular jail. He was not acquitted, but in 1920, I think something had happened after Jallianwala Bagh and after all that protests. I think some emperor was coming or queen was coming, and a lot of political prisoners were pardoned. So that time he was pardoned along with several others. So he was in the cellular jail. And then he came and he stayed in the ashram for some time, and he learned painting. Now, just to bring this to a close, another important document that Sri Aurobindo, we must spend some time reflecting on as we deepen our understanding of his political work or his vision for the future of world, future of India, future of humanity, is the message that he had given on the eve of India's independence. It was a message that was broadcast on All India Radio Trichy. They had requested him for a message. He did not read it out. He had sent them the message. And in that message, I'm not just going to read all this. I can give this to Nidhi ji if anybody wants. They can go through the presentation and spend some time at the references also. In that message he spoke of his 5 visions, 5 dreams. The first dream was free and united India. He said India is free, but India is not united. We know there was partition. The Indian freedom came with this scar of partition, as if, the arm of India was sort of cut off on 2 sides. 2 arms were cut off at that time. The second dream was resurgence of Asia. So as if to sort of balance the world. And we see this happening today if we look at what the trends, the world situation, the geopolitics of the world these days. His third dream was world unity, but not an externally imposed unity through some administrative mechanisms, but rather a unity through the soul. The first experiment of that is being done just close to Pondicherry in Aurobindo. The fourth dream is that already there is, even at that time it had started. Today, so there is a lot more of that. The waking up of the world to the spiritual gift that India has to give. So spiritual gift of India to the world, more and more that. But he said to do that, first India has to recognize what spiritual gems, what spiritual gifts our ancestors have bestowed on us. And the final step, the final dream that he spoke of, is an evolution of consciousness from mind to some plane of consciousness higher than mind, which he called as supermind. For that also we have to understand his experiences with Swami Vivekananda, his communion with Swami Vivekananda in prison. See, Swami Vivekananda had already left his body by that time. But for 15 days, Sri Aurobindo heard him consciously, very clearly during his prison. That's why that prison cell is a tapasya sthal, right? So Swami Vivekananda had pointed out to him that how to go as he's ascending in consciousness to get to something beyond mind. But Sri Aurobindo was the one who gave that plane of consciousness the word supermind. I'm not going into the philosophy of what that is, but it has a seed. The root of it goes back to the Vedic philosophy, the Vedic vision. But the point that I want to bring out is that none of these dreams, the first 4 dreams, are possible in their true essence if we don't fulfill the 5th dream, which is if we don't work on ourselves to evolve and to ascend in consciousness. We are not even at the mental, rational, intellectual consciousness. Most of the time we are operating from what in integral yoga we understand as the vital consciousness, the consciousness of the life play, where we are driven by our impulses, our desires, our petty opinions. These opinions don't mean anything. These are preferences of our vital nature, our temperament, our outer temperament, our lower nature. Most of the time we are operating from that. So from that we have to rise to higher and higher level of consciousness. Only then these other dreams are possible. Even the fact of united India, the Akhand Bharat, many people use that term. But for him, for Sri Aurobindo said, there is no other, it's not Akhand because the soul of India is indivisible. We may not have the Akhand Bharat as one major political entity. It could take different forms. It could be a federation. But the soul of India is one. Rest of it has to work out. How it happens? But he has, when we read this document, we find he's given some examples of common political action, common social action that can be done to bring people together in spirit. But a lot has also happened since then, which will make this vision of united India difficult if we don't evolve in consciousness. That's the point that I wanted to bring that point. And just I'll close with this. I mentioned earlier that he was very concerned about education, national education, as a way to bring the true Swaraj of the mind, the true decolonized mind of India. And he was concerned about what he said as the divorce that has happened of present India from the past. And he's writing, about 100 years ago, that divorce actually became even more stringent after independence, our political independence, where we just let go of all the wealth, the spiritual and intellectual wealth of the past. Even at that time, of course, because the British were there, so naturally the British system of education, the Macaulay system of education that we know, they had cut Indian mind, Indian heart, Indian soul from the spiritual and intellectual past of their civilization. And the result was that we lost original thinking. We lost high aspiration. And that is what we need to bring it back by connecting ourselves to the past, but to use it to solve modern problems in a modern way. That, he said, is the mission of nationalism, to recover Indian thought, Indian character, Indian perceptions, Indian greatness, and to solve the problems that perplex the world in an Indian spirit. And for that, he's also warned that we cannot be exclusively concerned about political or the economic side of things. We have to bring everything, which is our religion, our dharma, our philosophy, our art, our literature. Everything has to be studied, has to be understood in a new light. That is the immemorial Aryan spirit that we have to awaken into, and we have to get to before we can really rise as a nation. So I know I've just taken the full time that Nidhi you gave me, so I apologize, but it's such a dear topic, such a heartfelt topic to me. So I'll stop. Any quick comments or questions we can take?
Thank you so much, Beloo ji. We have thoroughly been so engrossed over the past 1 hour, 10, 15 minutes about these different ideas on nation, nationalism, spirituality, India. I think most of us were also reflecting and introspecting as you speak. And in the interest of time, I would want our participants to kindly share their comments, feedback, or any immediate questions that you would like Dr. Beloo ji to address. We must take advantage of her extensive work on Sri Aurobindo. So if there are any questions, I request participants to kindly raise their hand or put your questions in the chat box. So Prachi ji is saying that she understood these concepts very nicely. And I think she also earlier commented that this whole idea of nation and nationalism that you explained through Sri Aurobindo's lens, it was very different and unique. So thank you. Very informative session. Oh, that is what Mahesh ji and Dr. Sheetal madam are saying. Okay, Praveen ji is requesting for your email address, Beloo ji.
Sure, sure. I'm just going to write down in.
Ma'am, can I speak?
Yes.
Yeah, just a minute, Devidas ji. Just give me 10 seconds. Yes, Chandra Mohan ji, I was following some material that you have shared with me over WhatsApp. So I will invite Chandra Mohan ji's comment later on. Devidas ji, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I have just put my email in the chat box, so anybody feel free to.
Nidhi ma'am, thank you very much for giving the truthful and informative lecture. Thanks to Beloo ma'am, very thankful. I'm getting full knowledge of this. As even within a 1 hour week are not even single minute boring, ma'am. Thank you very much for this such a beautiful lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope that for everyone, the takeaway is that some of Sri Aurobindo's works should be taken to our students in universities and colleges. I hope all of us have made note of that. Beloo ma'am has emphasized that some lectures, I've put the YouTube link of the Uttar Para speech. So if you can first listen to the speech yourself, probably take it to your students, give them some homework or assignment based on it, ask them to explore Sri Aurobindo's ideas. And in fact, in one session that I'd done on Indic ideas on political governance, administration, and in so many of our IKS training sessions, we have always come to the conclusion that without understanding the work of certain thinkers and philosophers, yogis, like Sri Aurobindo, Swami Vivekanand, for me, I'm sitting in Gujarat, and Dr. Kanhaiya Lal Munshi, the founder of Bharatiya Vidya Bhavans, he has written so much in English, of course, but in my mother language, Gujarati, that currently I'm exploring his ideas and his work on education. Veer Savarkar, Lokmanya Tilak, so many. And I would recommend all of you, if you want to immediately start reading Sri Aurobindo's work, you can possibly look up a very interesting book on the idea of India as a civilizational nation state, recently written in 2020 by Shri Harsh Madhusudan and Rajiv Mantri. They have very clearly, using our ancient wisdom and thought, analyzed how India is not just a modern nation state, as we understand the concept of modern nation state, but it is a civilizational nation state. Okay. Praveen ji has requested for references. Don't worry, Praveen ji, I will follow up with Beloo ma'am whenever she has some time and request her to share some readings. I've already put the link of the Uttar Para speech, so I think that could be a good starting point. Chandra Mohan ji has also shared some reading links with me in WhatsApp, so I would put that in the group as well. Yes, Chandra Mohan ji, would you like to come in?
Namaskar, madam. Namaskar, madam. Beloo, madam.
Namaste,
Beloo, madam.
namaste.
Namaskar, madam. Because
Namaste.
this is the small book actually is nothing but 2 pages. What you have said about the Aurobindo's 5 ideas, madam, as a part of Sri Aurobindo's freedom speech, very interesting. Once that classwork was going on, and I was in the discussion of modern India, and one of the students who has visited Pondicherry, she has gifted this small book, and normally I have read it, and I used to say in the classroom when I say about our so-called these extremists, of course, really the great sons of Mother India, who exposed the true nationalism to our country, of course. And I thought that is the blessing from Sri Aurobindo itself. That's why just in the small 2-3 pages I shared to Nidhi madam. Thank you very much, madam, for organizers and Professor madam, Beloo madam. Thank you very much. Thank you. Very great. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chandra Mohanji. Some of you are requesting PPTs, but please, as organizers, we need to talk to all our resource persons, take their prior consent and permission, and only if they consent, we will be sharing their presentations with you. That is a process and protocol that we need to follow. So kindly allow us some time for that. Also, in case any of you are missing any sessions, the recordings will be available. Belooji, we will be putting up the recording of your session and other sessions on NLD's YouTube channel. So we will share the link with you. There's a question by Sunita G. How Sri Aurobindo would see today's India? Is India moving forward towards his vision?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Before I address that, I will just say one thing, that you have my consent for the PPT. I'll email it to you so you can do whatever. I'll send it to you as a PDF, so feel free to share.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, so how Sri Aurobindo would see today's India? Well, I think I had done, when Nidhiji was introducing me, I had written several essays which were inspired by this very question, understanding contemporary India in the light of Sri Aurobindo. Because yeah, today's India is not what any of our rishis and yogis envisioned. But in the middle of all the chaos and the drama and the disorganization that we have, from time to time, we see truth trying to emerge. And IKS, for example, is one attempt to go back to the truth of our past, to identify that truth which made us, people use different words, Sone ki chidiya. Sone ki chidiya is not just about the material wealth, but also about spiritual wealth. But it's not just that we were only a spiritual nation. Our spirituality was not an ascetic kind of spirituality. That's one phase in our long history that has come about where we said, ye sab moh maya hai. We don't need to care the material, look after the material world. Our spirituality was always very integrative, matter and spirit together. And in between matter and spirit would be life and mind. So everything together in the light of the true truths. These are the expressions, English expressions Sri Aurobindo uses, to kind of identify. He uses words like true truths, perfect perfection, to really bring the spiritual aspect in that. So yes, looking at that, we are nowhere what they had envisioned. But the examples, for example, this whole IKS that I was talking about, or many other attempts, the book that Nidhiji mentioned, people are writing about India as a civilizational nation. People are challenging the colonial scholarship on sati, for example, or all kinds of things that were put out on us as to feel ashamed of. People are questioning all of that scholarship. This is how we are reclaiming it. So yes, there are attempts going on. In some tiny little ways, we are maybe moving towards that vision, but it's a long, India does not live in centuries. India lives in millennia. If India is supposed to be leading the world to a new truth, to a new world, I mean, if you go deeper into Sri Aurobindo's mother's philosophical vision for the future of humanity, you will be surprised that we are at the cusp of an entirely new world, entirely new creation. If all that has to happen, there is a lot of cleaning up that has to happen. That's why when we even,
Yes.
I mean, I just find it so interesting. Our stories capture this. So when the avatar of Ram came, he had to
Yes.
clean out a lot of ground in order to create a possibility of a Ram Rajya, the Sattvic mind that Sri Aurobindo speaks of. So yes, we are going through a lot of destruction, a lot of chaos, but all that is part of the cleaning up, cleansing up that has to happen. So if we see it in that line, because it's always divine will that is unfolding.
Yes.
We have to look at it like that. For specifics, please look up my book, which has essay on gender, on education, on interreligious disharmony, and all those questions I took up there. Even the idea of some of the essays were written around the time of Award Wapsi. So I even questioned who is an intellectual, all
Right.
that kind of things. So yeah.
Right. Thank you, Beloo ji, for answering that question. I hope, Sunita ji, you have your answer. And I would request Beloo ji to also share details of her book. I will put it across in the WhatsApp group and any other initial primary key reading material that our participants can explore to better understand Sri Aurobindo's vision, work, and philosophy, especially if it is on education.
Yes.
That will be of immediate interest, concern, and use to all our participants as educators in higher educational institutions.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to send you one essay that was published on rethinking. It's a longish essay, but I'll send you at least as a starting reading point. So.
Okay. And just to round up and close this session, I would like to ask Beloo ji as to who are the other contemporary thinkers and philosophers in Bharat whom we can refer to, read, and follow along with Sri Aurobindo. Somebody that you would like to recommend, or somebody who you think Sri Aurobindo had a dialogue with, or Sri Aurobindo was inspired by?
Inspired by certainly Swami Vivekananda. He had read Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. In many ways, his yogic work also picks up from there and goes further. Every avatar, every rishi builds upon the works of previous rishis and saints and incarnations. So yes, certainly Ramakrishna's Gospel or Swami Vivekananda's writings, even Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, lots of similarities also in the sense of their educational thought. In fact, I had done a small 20-minute lecture on Tagore's philosophy on education. I'll send you the link on that also. The starting point of Shantiniketan was his attempt to decolonize Indian education. So there I see a lot of parallel there as well. These are the things many people today would not like to attribute to Tagore, because they just want to only look at his essays going beyond nationalism to globalism.
Yes.
But
that is the appropriation that we have to challenge and fight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But he was very much concerned about, so there is a whole discussion that Tagore does on the role of brahmacharya when correctly understood in education.
Mm-hmm.
And Sri Aurobindo has also talked so much about that the entire intellectual superstructure that ancient India built, intellectual, not just, here he's not even talking about spiritual, whether we had the literature, whether we had the architectural sciences, the aesthetic texts on aesthetics, all that intellectual wealth was built on the principle of brahmacharya. So there I see a lot of parallels, at least from the education, these thinkers I would suggest.
Great. Thank you so much for your patience, for agreeing to be on our platform, for accepting our invitation. It was wonderful. And I would like to share with our participants that we had tried to bring Beloo ma'am to all of you, even during the first 2 editions of the course, but somehow that could not work out, but I am so delighted and honored and happy that Beloo ma'am agreed to do a session in this edition. And we hope that she will continue to bless our efforts and our initiative to integrate IKS into mainstream education. And all of us together are now a part of this sadhana.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know how that previous think tanks did not work out, but absolutely, whenever you are doing next time or any other ideas, we can explore further, because from time to time, we also offer short courses on selected aspects of Sri Aurobindo's work. So I'll share that information with you if you're through NLD platform, you would like to collaborate or do some things. In fact, we are working on 2 courses for 2026. So I'll share the details with you.
I think it was just meant to be this time, and it has manifested so beautifully.
Thank you.
And since all of us are in the university and the educational space, Beloo ji is also connected to many higher educational institutions. So now that you have her contact, I would also encourage to invite her to your educational space to do courses and lectures on Sri Aurobindo, as and when her time permits, because she's extremely busy with her own work, research. But I think our young students must also benefit from her expertise and her experience. So thank you so much, everyone. Special thanks to Dr. Beloo ji once again. And I look forward to meeting you in Pondicherry next year.
Yes, soon.
And I extend an invitation to you to Vadodara all the time.
Oh, that is a thief spell for me. I was telling Dr. Amit today that there's a program on December 1st and 2nd, which I have to miss because we have another program ending on 30th. So there's no time for me to go. But I will look forward to whenever he calls me there.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You're most welcome to Vadodara.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Beloo ji, you can exit.
Okay.
I will just...
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just leave.